Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 54th Right and Left Discussion Forum. Today's discussion forum is a significant departure from our first 53. Up until now, we've done all of our programs in the WCTV studio in front of John Matting. He was the only one who was able to see them. Today, we're in front of a live audience in the Suprema Senior Center Cafe, and the audience is invited to participate in the discussion. A microphone has been set up in the center of the room, and anyone with a question or comment will approach the mic after each of the panelists have made an opening statement and will be given a cue at an appropriate time by moi to make your question or comment. The purpose of our discussion forum, as always, is to demonstrate the value of civilized discussion in solving problems and finding a path to better decision making. Today's topic asks the question, is climate change real? Is human activity the primary cause? And are international policies for dealing with it based more on science or politics? Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Dr. Natalie Sydorenko, educator, writer, and consultant in the field of communications. On her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On Bryan's left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and current member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist and all-around Renaissance man. Natalie, as you know, the debate around climate change ranges from the certainty of cataclysmic events on one hand and the complete climate change denial on the other. Where do you come down on this?
Well, thank you for asking me, John. This is a topic that is very heated and I think doesn't draw enough attention, quite frankly. The Earth has evolved time and again since its inception. But yes, I fully believe in science-backed climate change precipitated mostly by humans. 89 to 98% of scientists over the past 10 years, depending on what research study you read, agree that humans are upping the rate of the climate changing, and that's enough evidence for me. That percentage is high enough for me to believe in. I understand the flaws of research, but I think we need to understand that climate change doesn't just mean global warming. I think that misnomer has really hurt the efforts to try to curb what we are doing for the environment. Climate change is about extremes in our weather, loss of habitat, loss of species, not just solely rising temps. It is an inconvenient truth to believe this, as Al Gore tried to argue years ago in his documentary, not just for the fossil fuel industry and not just for the global economy, but for all of us average folks as we fall prey to the habits of convenience, travel, comfort. And then I think there's the fear factor. It's very scary to imagine our Earth dying and us dying along with it. But the scarier thing to me is to ignore and deny what our human population is doing to the planet. I think doing nothing is scarier than doing something. I'd rather be informed by any threat and be able to take action against it. I think we spend a lot of time on war, terrorism, trade issues, but if we don't have a planet to live on, then all of those things don't seem to be the main focus. My two main arguments would be, one, I think most people believe in science enough to go get medicine and see the doctor and have surgery if they need it. But yet this whole area of science that's climatology, people want to largely ignore and say it's not happening, it's a myth. So I don't understand the disconnect there between believing in some science but not believing in earth science. I think this is critical because the health of our planet is the only home we have. Instead of radical beliefs about Armageddon or succumbing to leaving Earth and relocating on another planet, I think we have to accept that we need to act accordingly on this planet. Will it take sacrifice? Sure, but that's non-negotiable to me. I have children, and I want my children to be able to grow up on a healthy planet. My views are largely influenced by researcher, activist, and environmentalist Bill McKibben. He's the founder of the organization 350.org. They do activism in 180 countries to raise awareness about climate change, the effects of it on small populations and large, and how it affects the global economy and what we can do about that. I feel that as laypersons, we just need to be logical about the issue. The human race is growing exponentially. We use a multitude of resources on a daily basis, and we have to acknowledge what we're doing to the planet and make some really critical decisions to try to reverse that. I don't think we should give up hope. I think our planet is absolutely savable. And as Senator Sheldon Whitehouse says, it's time to wake up.
Bryan, I'll bet that you've got a response to that.
Well, I think Natalie has laid out the case for the global warming believers.
Climate change.
I'm sorry, that's right. That's right, I have to update my vernacular here. The issue that I have is that the science behind it has become almost a religion to these people. It's their belief, it's a dogma. Those that actually believe in climate change, and I believe in some man-made climate change, I don't actually adhere to their solutions to the issue. And when those people voice their opinions, they get shouted down. I brought a little article, you can look it up yourself, it was in the Wall Street Journal recently, The Honor of Being Mugged by Climate Censors. And this was written by Bjorn Lomborg, who is a scientist. He believes in climate change. He's part of an institute. And because he doesn't go along with the solutions that these people provide, and Dr. Natalie, basically talked a little bit about that, he's considered a nut. He's considered a denier, that he doesn't believe in science. And I don't think that doesn't further the debate on it. One of the things that I found interesting was everyone likes to cite the United Nations. And there were two statements that were taken out of the draft for the UN report on global warming.
Yeah, are you talking about the International Panel on Climate Change,
Yes.
the IP? Okay.
What year was
Yes.
that? Do you know?
1996.
Okay.
This is what a lot of folks hang their hat on with the UN. And the first statement that was taken out, and what I found interesting was the scientists that put together the report submitted the report, and then the folks that needed to massage the information to make their points decided that they would go in and edit what they didn't feel furthered their belief. The first statement was, none of the studies cited above has shown clear evidence that we can attribute the observed climate changes to increases in greenhouse gases. And number two was, no study to date has positively attributed all or part of the climate change to man-made causes. And when they cite numbers like 97% of the scientists, 98% of the scientists, there's been a lot of fact-checking on those particular numbers. And a lot of the studies that they point to, the one study that everyone, they sort of the holy grail, they debunked in that only, I think it was 79 of the reported studies that they reviewed, of the 2,000 studies that were in the cohort, actually had anything to do with man being a contributor to greenhouse gases. So I think sometimes they play a little fast and loose with the facts. I believe that there is some climate change. I believe we need to be good stewards of our planet. I believe that there are things we can do as a population that will help our planet, but I just don't go along with some of the drastic measures that the folks that are trying to further this as the be-all, end-all to the planet want us to undertake.
Patty, I know that you've got the heart of a scientist, like Ron sitting next to you.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I first wanted to address a couple of things that Bryan said when he talked about those that are making reports and scientific studies, and they are massaging the facts to meet their agenda. That's actually being done on both sides. I would agree with him, but it is both sides. It was one of H.W. Bush's appointees that was to discuss this actually ended up left office because he took the reports that came to them and massaged the heck out of them to say that there was no such thing as climate change. And he resigned from his job when the scandal broke and immediately went to work for Exxon Oil, we could cite cases, I think, all day on both of those. Is climate change due only to human activities? No. You have continental drift, you have volcanic uprisings, you have solar radiation. There's not a lot we can do about some of those. What we can do something about, though, is the changes in the climate that are made by what we as humans do. The French foreign minister, and I think this was just today, made the comment that where it comes to climate change, we do not have a right to fail because there is no alternative planet. And there is nowhere else that we can travel to. You know, the interesting thing to me is that many people, I think, formulate their opinion on climate change based upon their political party. Unfortunately, I think, without really looking at the facts and examining the data. I saw an interesting Gallup poll that said when it came to global warming, 89% of liberal Democrats believed in it, 66% of the independents, and 37% were Republican. Then they said, okay, if there is climate change, if there's global warming, do you think it's man-made? 81% of liberal Democrats said yes, 27% of the Republicans said yes. So most of them if it does occur, is it caused just by what's out in nature and nothing man-made? 16% of liberal Democrats said yes, that's, you know, it's all natural. But 70% of the conservatives. Now, how can people looking at similar facts be that far apart in their beliefs? But unfortunately, we as a society put an R&D label next to our names, and then we decide that the way we feel and our viewpoints on different issues are going to have to be by that party line, and we have to get away from that. That being said, I do believe in climate change. I think when the data is out there as to the effects that it's had on the glaciers, the amount of the ice that's covering the seas right now. I just saw a couple days ago, they had pictures of Mead Lake, you know, where the Hoover Dam is.
Lake Mead.
Lake Mead, excuse me. Lake Mead. And it has gone down in level 150 feet in the last 14 years. 150 feet. They showed places where you could see on the sides the drop in the water level. Now that's not just because it's a dry year. This is one of the effects that we have from the average temperature going up. You know, the concern that we have is the carbon emissions that we have, the greenhouse gases, and there are ways to address this and not hurt the economy, but also keep this planet safe so that not just our children, but our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren will have a planet to live on.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Chamberlin, you've been very, very patient in waiting to chime in on this.
There are some interesting points and some data. I'm sure we'll get some interesting points and data from our audience. I don't think anybody here is going to have their opinion changed tonight, least of all Bryan, or least of all me. Because psychologists tell us that there's something called the backfire effect. When we have a strongly held opinion and we hear something strongly held opinion against
That's
it,
true.
we retrench. We get stronger in our opinion.
Dig in.
Scientists are just as liable to do that as anybody else. The nice thing about scientists, hopefully, is that with enough data and enough information, those opinions get changed. A couple of examples. Charles Darwin had an awful hard time getting his theory of his studies of evolution by natural selection accepted. I think by now there probably aren't a lot of scientists who don't follow that, at least in one of its forms and modifications. Another one is continental drift. Back in the 1940s and 50s, when I believe his name was Charles Wegner, postulated this, nobody believed it. But now, with enough information about looking at how the continents fit together, how the Now, the flora and fauna have changed and the geology of that. Everybody believes in continental drift causes things like this horrendous earthquake we just had in Nepal. So, one interesting thing about science is that it's true whether you believe it or not, unlike politics. Now, what do scientists mean by it's true? Truth is, in the natural world, is bounded by the limits of measurement, by the limits of error, by the limits of accuracy. And this is why people don't understand how situations can change. One night this thing is good for us, now it isn't. Data change, more data are accumulated, more studies are made, more information is available, and so things can be modified in view of that. This sort of thing has happened also in climate change, and I'll give a couple of examples here. A recent report by National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has measured for last year the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere of 400.83 parts per million. That's the largest number in the modern world. The first time it's gone over 400. It's been 2 million years since that happened, and it happened then because of volcanic activity, fossil records. 250 billion years ago, at the end of the Permian, there was a great dying where 90% of the species then present were extinguished, and that again is felt to be, by the geologic record, by intense volcanic activity. Now, carbon dioxide is 80% higher than it was in 1980. It has grown in 35 years, it has grown 60 parts per million. Pre-human, it took 6,000 years to reach 80 parts per million. It's higher in the northern hemisphere because we are more industrialized. In the northern hemisphere, we have more power plants and more automobiles spewing out carbon dioxide. The long-term trends have been accelerating the last 15 years. The long-term trends in warming of the planet have been accelerating in the last 15 years. Not just changing, accelerating. We put 30 million tons per day of carbon dioxide into the oceans. Well, you say, oh, well, that's great. The oceans are sucking up the carbon dioxide. We don't have to worry about it. But carbon dioxide joins with water and forms an acid called carbonic acid, which is a weak acid. So the hydrogen ion comes off, leaving the HCO3 ion behind. The hydrogen atom, the proton, makes the seas more acid. This does things like dissolving the corals. Why should that matter? Well, the corals are 10% of the ocean, but they're 25% of the life in the ocean, and millions of people rely on the ocean for their food. The carbonate is not rebuilding, not being able to be used for rebuilding for the corals or for the shellfish, or there are studies on that, the oysters, the clams, because it's tied up in the carbonic acid ion. So, at this rate, in 50 to 100 years, we'll likely reach estimates that'll be similar to what was present in the Permian. So, how can we not try to do something about this? Well, politically and physically, I think what we should do is try to stop relying or cut back on reliance of carbon dioxide emitting devices such as power plants,
and
such
human
as
beings.
cars, coal plants.
And human beings.
Well, human beings, there are a lot of us. We need to look at that too. That's a whole other topic.
The increase in population, right?
That's a whole other topic.
Huge
But it's
impact.
always part of it, you know. So politically, what can we do? Well, I think we need to do more research and more reliance and spend more money on alternative sources of energy, solar, even nuclear. We've got to solve a lot of serious problems about nuclear energy, but
It's safe.
and solar energy and wind energy and wave energy, water power. All these things are available. All these things can be advanced and improved, and I think they must be.
And you don't think we're making enough progress in those areas?
We're making a good deal.
Yeah.
But recently, the state of Ohio just recently changed the economic incentive to do wind power. You know, step backwards. Our state steps backwards a lot.
Would anyone like to step up to the microphone and ask a question or make a comment? Jim, you keep looking at Terry. Why don't, you have something on your mind?
I would like to point out, Dr. Chamberlain, obviously I can't go toe-to-toe with Dr. Chamberlain, but I did do some homework. And it looks to me, I went to the Friends of Science website, which seems to be, neither here nor there when it comes to their opinions, but they've gathered what they consider some myths and put some facts with it. One of the myths that they talk about, which Dr. Chamberlain talked about, was the human-produced carbon dioxide has increased over the last 100 years, adding to the greenhouse effect, thus causing the Earth's warming of the last 100 years. And basically, they refute that. They say that CO2 is a result of, not the cause of warming, and that geological fieldwork and recent sediments confirms this causal relationship. There is solid evidence that as temperatures move up and down naturally and cyclically throughout solar radiation, orbital and galactic influences, the warming surface layers of the Earth oceans expel more CO2 as a result. So I think that there's a lot of room when we start looking at the science. And I'm for a real science, objective science, not science with the end in mind. And I think I see that a lot with global warming. They have a hypothesis, they want to prove that hypothesis, and they'll go to great lengths to make sure it comes out the way they want it to. One of the things they brought up are these stations, surface temperature stations, that are placed throughout the world, and some of them are placed near urban areas, and they're getting higher readings, and where Patty talks about temperatures going up by 2 or 3 degrees, but they don't want to recognize that urban effect on that station, and the scientists want to. They want to recognize that effect, adjust the numbers accordingly. The folks that are behind the global warming, they don't want that. They want that 1 or 2 or 3 degree increase in the temperature because it proves their point, and that point goes to, fossil fuels. Comes down to coal, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia. They're big coal-producing states. There are ways, I believe, that technology and incentives to create a cleaner burning fossil fuel are out there, and we have to get past, making the numbers fit, and letting some of the great ingenuity that we have in this country go to work on those problems.
Yeah, I'm just enough of a cynic to want to follow the money. And there are hundreds of billions of dollars at stake in this issue. And when you think about all of the money the federal government puts out in grants through the Energy Department, the Department of Interior, the EPA, the National Oceanic and Aeronautics Administration, and then you look at all of the nonprofits. Oh, Patty, I feel sorry for you.
I know. I've had this all week.
Yeah. Anyway. But the nonprofits like the Isaac Walton League, or the Sierra Club, Audubon Society. Then on the other side, there are the oil companies and the politicians' favorite target, the Koch brothers. They're all kicking in tons and tons of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I have to ask myself, where would the Department of Energy and the Interior, where would they be? Where would their funding be? Where would the funding be for the Sierra Club and the Audubon Society if there were no such thing as climate change?
But you can turn that around and say that.
It's an irrelevant question because there is climate change.
And
It's an irrelevant question. There is climate change. And Bryan has a refutation to your comments there. I have read some studies by, I don't know what it's called, geologists, cosmologists, whatever, that figure those who study long-term trends in the Earth's precession, the Earth's orbit change, we should be heading for another ice age.
yeah.
Well, that's what it started out to be. It started out to be, that was the big scare 25 years ago, that the Earth was going to cool so rapidly.
Yes.
Well, that
we
was
would
the
have
data.
this ice age.
Like
and that
before
never
1970.
happened. But we had some movies that came
Yeah.
out because Hollywood jumped on that theme and, ran with it. The apocalyptic movies of, Ice Age, The Day After, New York,
thank
and
you.
that kind of stuff.
It's a good way to get
But,
candy.
You know, there is room, I think, for debate on this.
Well, you know,
Well,
you mentioned,
My question for everyone would be, I guess I don't understand the room for debate because I feel like at the end of the day, the majority of people who go into science, like Ron, like other researchers similar to Ron, they do it because they have a passion for it and they educate themselves and they work really hard at what they're doing. I don't understand what they would gain. I understand what the oil industry would gain
That's my
by
point too.
saying, you know what, they're skewing their research, or we can make cleaner coal, cleaner oil. I understand what their lobbyists would gain and their profits and their bottom line. I don't understand what regular scientists trying to warn us and help the planet stand to gain by making things up, such as this is what's happening to the earth. You know, the coral reefs are becoming bleached. Toads in the rainforest, as far as 10 years ago or more, were dying off because mold was growing on their backs because of all the carbon dioxide and not enough sunlight and not enough fresh air.
Yeah.
We have no old growth trees left. I mean, serious old growth trees where the base would be as big as this room. We have absolutely changed the planet as human beings. So I don't know what they would have to gain to make them lie about this.
you know, Brian brought up the point about the testing stations where they're doing it. You know, you have to understand though, they're not basing these results because of that one testing station next to that community. They have them, a number of them. Now it's not thousands and thousands of them, but there's enough so that you have both extremes. And also they'll find outliers if they exist. And if there is an outlier, that gets thrown out. So to say that because they have one or two that are located here, you have to, I think, you know, look at all of them. You know, the other thing that happens.
It's going to have to wait because we're running out of time.
Oh,
And I want
sorry.
to, but I want to thank you for a very stimulating conversation. And I think this part of it's ending just on time. But
Yeah, now that I'm not coughing.
I want to thank the audience for joining us for part one on our global climate change program, and watch for part two on WCTV schedule or anytime on mypegcentral.com. Thank you. Okay. We're going to continue in just a moment.